Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, air, restoration, and flood services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit BillHowe.com. And by the Conrad Trebas Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
The fallout from the ICE raid on a South Park restaurant continues. Thank you for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Today, union leaders condemned the raid on Buona Forchetta, calling it cruel and an attack on workers. And as KPBS reporter Alexander Nguyen tells us, the warrant justifying the raid was also unsealed.
Stop deporting workers!
Labor leaders held a rally today in front of the federal courthouse downtown to condemn the raid at Buona Forchetta last week.
And a wave of terror has been unleashed by this administration.
They say what happened in South Park is reminiscent of a dictatorship. Lorena Gonzalez, president of the California Federation of Labor Unions, says the raid was a scare tactic meant to intimidate workers.
They told us it was about criminals and making America safer. Now, those of us who have worked in the immigrant community for years knew that was bullshit.
Buona Forchetta posted a note on its door saying all locations in San Diego and Orange counties are closed Monday and Tuesday. People have been leaving flowers here in support of the workers. In the warrant released yesterday, it says about 50% of the workers use fake documents to obtain work. Labor leaders say today that's no reason for the show of force Friday.
They handcuffed workers. They fired explosives near families, and they've left workers and families trembling. This is what happens when politicians treat human beings as if they're targets.
According to the warrant, Homeland Security received the initial tip in November 2020 about workers using fraudulent green cards. A follow-up tip came at the end of January this year. A DHS investigation in February showed that 19 workers submitted fraudulent green cards. That led to the raid Friday, resulting in the arrest of 4 workers.
They sent masked, armed troops into a neighborhood with high-grade military weapons for fake papers. That is absolute and utter bullshit.
San Diego Council member Ilo Rivera had called ICE agents terrorists, and the raid state-sponsored terrorism on his Instagram account. That grabbed the attention of Stephen Miller, the White House Deputy Chief of Staff. Ilo Rivera was unapologetic.
Stephen Miller and Donald Trump, just like any bully, they don't like to be called out. And so when they get called out, they try to intimidate again. I called him a fascist because he is a fascist.
Buona Forchetta says it is still reviewing the allegations stated in the warrant. Alexander Nguyen, KPBS News.
Well, tonight we're dropping down into the low 60s, but we're also tracking some rain and thunderstorms across SoCal. I'll break down exactly what to expect with that, but also we have some changes coming throughout the rest of the week as far as our temperatures and that marine layer bringing the low clouds. We'll break it all down coming up.
You could soon have to pay a little bit more to park in San Diego. Yesterday, the City Council approved a package of reforms. KPBS Metro reporter Andrew Bowen says the price you pay at meters could fluctuate based on demand.
Studies show if parking meters are too cheap, they don't really do their job of managing parking demand and increasing turnover. If they're too expensive, they might sit empty. That's why the San Diego City Council approved shifting to dynamic pricing. Take the parking meters near Petco Park. Those premium parking spots will get more expensive during Padres games, when private lots and garages can easily charge $50 or more. Councilmember Raul Campillo said it's common sense efficiency.
I know that we're using data to make the right determination on this. It's been collected in the study, and these will be analyzed at least quarterly to make sure that data is driving our decision about the pricing.
The council also ended a prohibition on charging for parking on Sundays and revamped the rules around creating residential parking permit zones. Councilmember Stephen Whitburn said he asked for those changes to help residents in dense, mixed-use neighborhoods who don't have off-street parking.
What this means is that residents who live in existing parking meter zones will be able to get a permit that will allow them to continue to park at the meters without charge on Sundays.
In the coming weeks, the council will also vote on whether to charge for parking in Balboa Park, at least in the most high-demand lots. That's been met with resistance from the park's museums and cultural institutions, who fear it will discourage people from visiting the park. Councilmember Sean Ela Rivera disagreed.
I think this is a classic example of San Diego needing to be more confident in itself. People are going to go to Balboa Park. It's a beautiful park with incredible museums and resources. We can figure this out.
At Ela Rivera's insistence, the mayor's office agreed to study a program that would offer discounts to city residents who park in Balboa Park lots. The city still has to update signage and do more study and outreach before changing parking meter rates and enforcement hours. Andrew Bowen, KPBS News.
The city is considering raising the price of ambulance rides gradually over the next 3 years. If approved, prices will rise 7% across the board next year. Right now, an ambulance ride ranges from $1,200 to over $3,000, making costs anywhere from $200 to $300 more per ride. The increases would only apply to private insurance companies, and Falk became the city's new ambulance provider back in 2021. At the time, public records showed that Falk consistently did not meet the required hours of service promised to the city and lagged on response times in certain parts of the city.
What goes on through your mind when you're delivering constantly bad news to the city and to the people?
That's difficult for me, for sure. For me to have to now continue to go back to council and say they're not living up to their promise also has my name next to that.
Falk recently entered an alliance model partnership with the city, giving the city full control and management over the ambulance system. After a series of fatal encounters with police, National City has tried to keep officers from being the first to respond during mental health crises. KPBS South Bay reporter Corey Suzuki looked into the changes the city has made.
In 2018, National City police officers arrested a black man named Earl McNeil. They used a full-body restraint device and a mesh face covering to bind his arms and legs. McNeil had a heart attack in custody. A year later, in 2019, officers held a white man named Tony Wilson against the ground and tased him repeatedly. He stopped breathing. And in 2021, officers confronted a Latino man named Ryan Umana. He was walking barefoot in the rain, holding a machete. The officers tased and shot him 8 times. In all 3 cases, the families of these men say they were experiencing mental health crises. Independently, each of the families sued the city, accusing officers of using excessive force. In all 3 cases, National City leaders decided to pay to settle the lawsuits instead of allowing them to go to trial. This past February, they approved the final settlement, $1 million for Umana's family.
I want there to be some transparency and accountability.
Sophia Bendari is the daughter of Wilson, the man who was held down and tased. She says it felt like the police used her father's mental illness and the fact that he had used drugs and had been in and out of jail to try and paint his life as less important.
They literally talked about my dad like he was a piece of garbage. And it's like, he was a human being, you know?
Joanna Schwartz is a professor of law at UCLA and a national expert on police misconduct litigation. She says lawsuits like these are opportunities for cities to examine what might have gone wrong and what changes they could make to prevent future fatal encounters.
There may have been wrongdoing by police, there may not have been wrongdoing by police, but you're never going to know the answer to that question unless you actually look at the information in that lawsuit and try to understand what went wrong.
But often, Schwartz says that kind of reflection doesn't happen.
What I have found is that often law enforcement agencies don't even do that first step of trying to learn from the lawsuits that have been brought against them.
In the 7 years since that first in custody death, elected officials in National City have made some changes. Under pressure from the public, the city council pushed to keep police officers from being the first to respond to people in mental health crises. Marcus Bush is the vice mayor of National City.
The police were considering before, but it wasn't as big a priority. So these incidences, unfortunately, push it to priority, push it at the forefront.
The city already had a program called the Psychiatric Emergency Response Team, or PERT, county mental health workers who respond alongside officers. But the county has struggled to fully staff the program, and their teams are not always available. In June 2021, the City Council voted to partner with the county to deploy a new program, the Mobile Crisis Response Teams, or MCRTs. The police chief at the time, Jose Tellez, said it was an important step.
Police responders that not having to answer these calls or being the first ones to respond is it's a good thing.
MCRT teams are also made up of licensed clinicians, but they do not include any armed officers. They're also dispatched primarily through the 988 crisis number instead of 911 and are available 24/7. National City was one of the first cities in the county to sign up.
When I look at year over year, we're doubling our call volume every year.
Bree Lane is a program administrator with Telecare, the company that runs the MCRT program for most of San Diego County. She says 4 years in, they're seeing positive signs.
People are feeling more comfortable to access MCRT. It means law enforcement's accessing us more for people they're coming in contact with.
In 2023, the city also launched a small team of caseworkers to respond to homelessness-related calls. They do coordinate closely with police, but their team also does not include armed officers. But when it comes to these civil rights lawsuits, it's unclear what the city has learned from them. The police department declined multiple requests for interviews and refused to say what lessons they're learning from these cases, or whether they have made any changes to their policies.
What could we do better? No, we have not had that conversation. I think we should.
Bush, the vice mayor, says the police department has made strides when it comes to building trust, but he acknowledges that the city council needs to more openly discuss these cases.
I think where we leave it is, this incident, this was really bad. This is, let's make sure this doesn't happen again, and let's move on. But we don't take enough proactive steps to, okay, what are we making sure to help to make sure this doesn't happen again?
Bush says he hopes to change that pattern by having more discussions on the council and expanding the role of the city's Citizen Oversight Board. Bandari, Wilson's daughter, is hopeful about some of those changes.
Admitting you have a problem is part of a resolution, and I think that's huge. It really, really is,
Above all, though, Bandari wants to remind city officials that people in crisis are just as human and deserve to be treated with just as much dignity. In National City, Corey Suzuki, KPBS News.
I'm Jeff Bennett. Tonight on the NewsHour, former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert on why he says Israel is committing war crimes in Gaza. That's at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
This week, President Donald Trump is speaking with GOP lawmakers about his domestic policy agenda bill. Several Republican senators are raising concerns about the legislation as the chamber gears up to make changes after it passed in the House last month. Julia Benbrook details the ongoing discussions.
Senate Majority Leader John Thune was here at the White House this week to speak with President Donald Trump about the so-called Big Beautiful Bill. Following that meeting, Thune said that he and the president, quote, covered a lot of ground. But it's important to note here that we are still tracking several challenges ahead. Several Republican senators are voicing concerns about various parts of the bill, including the clean energy tax credit phase-out timeline, as well as potential changes to Medicaid. One of the senators speaking out is Rand Paul of Kentucky, who tells CNN he can't support it if an increase to the debt ceiling remains in the package. Trump spoke with him this week as well.
You can say it doesn't directly add to the debt, but if you increase the ceiling $5 trillion, you'll meet that. And what it does is it puts it off the back burner, and then we won't discuss it for a year or two. So I think it's a terrible idea to do this.
The president called you. Have you spoken to him about this?
I spoke to him this week, had a lengthy discussion with him.
How did that go?
He did most of the talking.
He didn't convince you.
Any changes the Senate makes could cause more issues in the House. They narrowly passed their version a couple of weeks ago, and several House members are warning their Senate counterparts not to make drastic adjustments. Republican leadership has set a goal of getting this to the president's desk for a signature by the 4th of July. At the White House, I'm Julia Benbrook.
The Defense Department is planning to rename a Navy ship that honors a civil rights icon with deep ties to San Diego. According to an official, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has ordered the Navy to rename the oiler ship USNS Harvey Mil. Mil was stationed in San Diego in the 50s when he was forced to resign from the military because he was gay. The ship was launched in 2021. It's unclear what the new name of the ship will be. Voting begins in the South Bay this week in the runoff election for San Diego County's District 1 supervisor, a race that will decide whether Democrats or Republicans have more influence over the county government. KPBS South Bay reporter Corey Suzuki says the top two candidates have sharply different views on immigration policy.
Whoever wins the District 1 race will likely make some major decisions on immigration. The 5-member Board of Supervisors votes on sanctuary policies and funding for the county's Immigrant Legal Defense Program, which provides free legal representation to people facing deportation in San Diego County. John McCann is a Republican and the mayor of Chula Vista. He opposes the county's current sanctuary policies and says he would look at cutting legal aid to reduce spending.
If, again, we need to look at cutting, that might be somewhere we would have to. I believe that we should be supporting the citizens first over people who are not citizens.
Running against McCann is Paloma Aguirre, a Democrat and the mayor of Imperial Beach. She says the sheriff should have had more input on the county's sanctuary policies, but she strongly supports funding for legal aid.
We're seeing even citizens being deported. At one point, where does that stop? If we don't have the legal representation, what if somebody doesn't have the resources to pay for a lawyer, for example?
If you live in District 1, the last day to cast your ballot is July 1st. Corey Suzuki, KPBS News.
You can find out more about the special election, the candidates, where to vote, and whether you live in District 1 on our website. Just go to kpbs.org/voterhub. San Diego Mayor Todd Gloria says parts of his 2026 budget proposal could save the city $400,000, but it comes at the cost of some popular outdoor attractions. A petition to keep Lake Murray and Lake Miramar open daily has received thousands of signatures. Budget cuts threaten to reduce hours to weekends only. The city's Parks and Recreation Department also faces job cuts and nearly $2 million less in funding. Residents told our media partner KGTV that this is a fight to preserve a way of life.
A lot of young people are stuck on TVs or their phones these days, and we need to get young people out here moving their bodies.
It'll affect me bad because this is where I come and get my spirituality in at. It releases depression.
The petition to save Lake Murray on change.org has received over 7,200 signatures so far. The City Council will vote on Mayor Gloria's final proposed budget next Tuesday. If you feel like you're constantly receiving scam calls, texts, or emails, then you are not alone. According to a new survey, an overwhelming majority are targeted by scammers every week. Here's Ivan Rodriguez with more on the common tactics scammers use and how you can protect yourself.
It really is an incredible number. A new survey finds 96% of Americans receive at least one scam message each week. An expert I spoke with says that it's concerning, but unfortunately not surprising. If you're checking your email every day, chances are you'll see a subject line that might make you raise a brow.
Right away, I'm thinking to myself, is this something that I've been expecting?
According to a CNET survey, 96% of U.S. adults receive at least one scam email, text, or phone call each week. 90% say they get scam emails on a weekly basis. CNET station Milden says the scam calls and texts are surging too.
My phone rings constantly, and that's at 83%, still very high, followed by text messages, of course, at 82%.
In 2024 alone, U.S. adults reported losing a collective whopping $470 million in those sneaky text scams, according to the Federal Trade Commission. Milden says fraudsters have gotten so good at crafting their messages and creating a sense of urgency that people need to stay vigilant, especially on phone calls.
If you don't know who that person is after you have said hello, don't say anything further, hang up. And the reason why I say that is so important is because artificial intelligence has evolved to where scammers are actually able to clone your voice and your responses to unfortunately use those for scams later.
Aside from following basic internet safety guidelines, such as not clicking unknown links and not answering unknown calls, Milden says there are other ways to keep criminals from impacting your finances.
Right now is a really good time to freeze your credit. So that way, if they happen to get access to your information, hey, your credit's already frozen.
Milden also suggests identity theft protection. Although it won't keep you from falling for a scam, at least you'll be alerted in case you do. Now, last month, the FBI issued an alert warning the public about a malicious text and also a voice messaging campaign involving scammers who were impersonating senior U.S. officials to target people, including former or current government officials. In Atlanta, I'm Ivan Rodriguez.
SeaWorld has agreed to pay $1.5 million to settle a class action lawsuit over annual pass auto renewals. The lawsuit was filed on behalf of 2 San Diego residents who say SeaWorld's website did not disclose that their annual passes would renew automatically, nor were they notified as the renewal date approached. They also claim SeaWorld made it difficult to cancel their passes. The settlement still requires final approval from a judge. For more information on the settlement and how to be included, you can go to SeaWorldAnnualPassSettlement.com.
Well, there's a few things that we are tracking on this Tuesday. Showers and thunderstorms, the marine layer bringing those low clouds, and the temperatures. A little bit of a change coming up just in time for the weekend. Let's start off with what to expect for tonight, though. Now, you'll notice we have several thunderstorm icons really from the coast all the way up into our mountain regions. Just about everybody is looking at the chance for some showers and thunderstorms as we go through the late evening, overnight hours. So something to keep an eye out for and just know is on the way. Temperature-wise, we're in the low 60s for Oceanside, Escondido, San Diego as well. We're into the 50s in Mount Laguna and in Campo. As we look ahead to tomorrow, the rain and the thunderstorms, that shifts just to higher elevations, actually even farther inland than Borrego Springs and Mount Laguna for the most part. Can't completely rule it out for all of you in Borrego Springs and Mount Laguna, but for the most part, we're not dealing with the showers and thunderstorms by the time the sun comes up tomorrow and we're heading throughout the day. Temperature-wise, we warm up into the 70s really across the board. 69 in San Diego, though, 90s for Borrego Springs. We continue to have some rough surf and some beach hazards that we have to watch out for. This is going through late tonight, all because of an area of low pressure that's coming off the coast, bringing the rain and the thunderstorms as well. We'll take a look at radar and satellite, give you an idea of exactly what to expect with the rain. All of us really dealing with the clouds, some of us dealing with the rain. Now, I will say some of this is maybe a little underdone as far as who all will see the rain and the thunderstorms, a few heavier downpours, and then this really moves farther inland as we go into tomorrow. Taking a look at your 5-day outlook here, we'll start with the coast. A lot of clouds really for the rest of the week, but you'll notice we have a little bit of a warming trend as we head throughout the rest of the week into the weekend. Moving further inland, we get from the mid-70s to the upper 70s by the time we get to Friday and Saturday. And Friday, you also notice those low clouds. That is finally going to break, and we won't be dealing with that as much anymore. In our mountains, we're in the 60s until we get to Sunday. Then we're in the mid-70s. In our desert region, we're in the 90s to end off the week. Well, triple digits for Friday to end off the work week and head into the weekend. That more summer-like feel is here. For KPBS News, I'm AccuWeather's Anna Azalian.
A classic North County coffee shop has something new brewing with the help of a Grammy Award-winning musician. KPBS reporter Jacob Ayers says a financial investment and a return to 90s coffee house culture are creating a community hub for the arts in Oceanside.
Grab a cup of joe and some grub, listen to music, and bring the neighborhood together. That's been the longtime goal of Jitter's Coffee Pub in Oceanside.
This has been my clubhouse since 2004. I've been coming to this coffee shop and done shows here. I've collabed with the owners outside of here on various projects.
Jason Mraz is a Grammy Award-winning musician who calls Oceanside home. He's deepening his connection to this coffee shop as an investor with a vision.
I proposed the idea that we build a stage here, and they trust me with some nighttime entertainment, and I've got a lot of great local musicians that are all itching to play here, and comedians from LA that want to come down and work on their sets.
Mraz says it's a great venue for artists to develop their material.
I came up through the coffee shop scene in the 90s and the early 2000s, and they were vital to communities. They were vital to artists, hanging up their art, performing their music.
The reason he came on board is that Jitter's owners were considering closing. Co-owner Valley Gilly says costs were rising.
Rent's gone up, I've been here 20 years in this location, and it's I wasn't sure if I was willing to pay more. It's like triple, when we started.
She and her husband, Clayton Balu, run the shop together.
We have essentially a mom and pop, right? You're working every day, you're doing everything.
She says during the pandemic, they had fewer customers and more takeout orders. It's a trend that the North County Economic Development Council says led other retail businesses to pivot. Gilly says the partnership with Mraz is breathing new life into the shop.
I feel lucky because so many places closed. We were lucky. you know, but that's scary to think about it. And I think that's one of the reasons I was like, should we keep going? Because I don't want to get into the same boat.
Miraz's partnership extends to his farm. He helps supply the cafe's updated menu with fruit, and soon some of his own coffee grown in Oceanside.
So I have 20 pounds reserved this year that I'm going to bring to Jitters and will serve as an espresso.
Jitters' official grand reopening takes place in mid-July, and the coffee pub will welcome auditions from songwriters and storytellers.
It's what I remember coffee shops being, and it was an all-ages place, and they were listening rooms to let the community share.
For those looking to watch and listen to those artists, Gilly says the weekly music events will be first come, first serve for the public. Jacob Ayer, KPBS News.
And here's a look at what we are working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. The number of people in ICE detention facilities has grown in recent months, but NPR's Morning Edition says the number of detainees overall is still far short of the Trump administration's goals. And KPBS Midday Edition is catching up on the District 1 Supervisor Special Election with KPBS reporter Corey Suzuki. And you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Have a great evening.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, air, restoration, and flood services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit BillHowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.